My wife took my inheritance to fix her parents' house behind my back. Now, she's facing the consequences. 34 am. It all began 6 months ago when my father passed away, leaving me a sizable inheritance of about $700,000. I didn't flaunt it. I just kept it in a separate account, thinking I'd eventually invest in something worthwhile. Maybe a small property or some sensible mutual funds. At first, my wife Susan seemed supportive. "It's your money," she'd say. "Your dad worked hard for it, so use it wisely." I appreciated that. We'd always made financial decisions together, or that what I thought. I was also mindful that this sum came specifically from my father's estate. I figured we'd discuss major uses for it, but I also wanted to maintain autonomy. After all, it was part of my father's legacy. About 2 months after the inheritance hit my account, I noticed large withdrawals appearing in my bank statements. $10,000 here, $15,000 there. At first, I thought it was an error or identity theft. Confused, I confronted Susan. She shrugged nonchalantly. "Don't worry, I'm transferring it for a great investment." Trust me, my heart pounded. Investment in what? She hesitated. "My parents' place. They really need an upgrade. It'll raise property values for everyone involved." This was news to me. I'd never agreed to pour tens of thousands of dollars into her parents' home. I pressed for details. She admitted she'd already hired contractors, chosen materials, and started renovations without consulting me even once. Her tone was dismissive, as if it was no big deal. "It's our family," she insisted. "Helping them helps us, right? And you still have plenty left. So what's the problem?" I stared at her in disbelief. "The problem is, you never asked. This is my inheritance. My father's money. We had zero discussion on this. You can't just grab $700 like it's petty cash." But she rolled her eyes, calling me dramatic. "I'm your wife. I have a right to make decisions for the family. Besides, your dad's gone, so the money's ours now." That statement chilled me. If this was her logic, grabbing money behind my back, acting entitled to every last cent, what else was she capable of? I demanded she stop the renovation immediately, but she shrugged, saying it was too late. "Contracts are signed, materials purchased. I can't just cancel it. Do you want to lose deposits?" She made it sound like I was the one being unreasonable. Desperate, I checked the account. Over $300 was already gone. Worse, I discovered further planned expenditures that would reach nearly $700 total, my entire inheritance. She'd effectively spent it all on a house we didn't own, with no formal agreement about any future returns. Outraged, I confronted her again, but she stayed smug, as though I should be grateful for her vision of helping her parents. Betrayal coursed through me. The idea that she'd funnel my inheritance into her parents' property without so much as a conversation was mind-boggling. I decided to contact a lawyer friend, see if there was any recourse. Susan might have crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I sat down with my lawyer friend the very next day, explaining the situation. He raised an eyebrow. "So, she took your inheritance and spent it on renovations for her parents' home?" I nodded, fists clenched in frustration. "Yes, without my consent." He let out a slow breath. "That money, by default, should be considered separate property if it's inherited and kept in your name. But if she moved it into a joint account, or used it for a marital purpose without your protest, this gets complicated." It turned out Susan had slyly moved large portions into our joint account, citing family investments. Because I didn't immediately contest the initial transfers, it might appear I'd allowed it. Still, he encouraged me to gather evidence. Text messages where she admitted the fund's origin, bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and any messages from contractors referencing her as the decision-maker. That night, I searched for anything in writing. Sure enough, I found emails from the contractors addressed solely to her, thanking her for swift payments. In one thread, the contractor asked if I was aware of the cost inflation due to premium materials. She replied, "He's fine with it," even though she'd never told me. My stomach churned at her casual manipulation. She was forging an entire renovation project behind my back, using money from my father's legacy. The next morning, I confronted her with the emails, my voice low and trembling. "Explain this to me. Why did you tell them I was fine with everything when you never asked me?" She shrugged, flipping her hair dismissively. "I had to do it. My parents' house is in dire shape. They deserve comfort, and you have the funds to give it. Stop acting selfish." My blood boiled. This is my inheritance, my father's. "How dare you call me selfish for not wanting to blow it on someone else's property without a discussion?" She smirked. "Oh, come on. Once your father's money landed in our accounts, it's effectively ours. My parents are family, so it benefits all of us in the long run. You're being petty." That sense of entitlement was astounding. She refused to see the betrayal or even offer an apology. Instead, she painted me as the villain for not sharing. Furious, I marched into the half-renovated house. Her parents were conveniently away. Contractors bustled about. The place looked like it was undergoing a major overhaul. New floors, fancy appliances, even a pool installation in the backyard. I demanded to know how much more was owed. One contractor sheepishly showed me the invoice. Another $200 at least. My jaw dropped. That would wipe out the rest of my inheritance. I realized I had to act quickly. The question was how. My lawyer mentioned filing for divorce, or at least a legal separation, to protect any remaining assets. He also said I could demand an injunction to halt further spending, but the damage was already done. Well over $500,000 poured into a house that wasn't mine, with no formal arrangement. I felt cornered, betrayed, and incensed. It was time to consider the nuclear option: divorce. My father's money might be gone, but I refused to let her keep walking all over me. I started the divorce process quietly, meeting my lawyer to outline a plan. "We'll aim to protect anything else you have," he said. "Do you own the marital home? Your personal assets? Retirement accounts?" I nodded. "Yes, but I need to ensure she doesn't raid them too." He suggested moving any personal funds into a separate account, and possibly freezing the joint one if possible. Meanwhile, Susan kept spending. She boasted about the new landscaping project behind her parents' house, sending me photos of water features and garden sculptures as if I'd be proud. Every text of hers read like a progress update on how well she was burning through my father's legacy. My resentment hardened. I replied tersely, "Stop the project. We can't afford more." She shot back. "Don't be ridiculous. It's almost done. Just a bit more." Her parents, for their part, seemed thrilled. One evening, I visited to see if they were at least aware it was my inheritance funding their dream remodel. They greeted me politely, but with a certain smugness. Her mother praised my generosity, patting me on the back. Her father grinned. When my daughter said you insisted on helping us, I was touched. My jaw nearly dropped. She told them I insisted? This was next-level deceit. They probably believed I was a willing sponsor. I had to bite my tongue, not wanting a public blow-up, but the betrayal ran deep. That night, I returned home to find Susan happily scrolling through new furniture catalogs, rattling off prices in the thousands. I demanded, "Why lie to your parents that I insisted on paying for all this?" She looked up with a bored expression. "They needed convincing. Don't you want them to like you? Now they adore you." My vision blurred with anger. "So you used me as some philanthropic ATM to gain their approval? This is insane." She rolled her eyes again. "Stop acting so outraged. We're married. My parents are your family too. This money helps them, so it helps us all." I realized she wouldn't stop. No amount of reasoning would shift her sense of entitlement. She genuinely believed my inheritance was hers to direct, as she pleased. That's when I told her, "I've had enough. I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes widened momentarily, then she shrugged. "Go ahead, but good luck reversing what's already been spent." The smugness in her tone suggested she thought she'd walk away with half of whatever else I had left. Spousal support? Alimony? everything. But she underestimated me. My lawyer said that inherited assets can remain separate property if properly documented, and her reckless spending might be seen as financial waste or even marital misconduct. This could influence the judge's decisions on property division. We prepared evidence, bank transfers, receipts, messages from her bragging about the renovation. I intended to show the court how she unilaterally drained my inheritance for her parents' gain, lying and manipulating me in the process. I realized there'd be no reconciliation. She'd shown no remorse, no regret. Fine. If she wanted a fight, I'd come prepared. My father's money was mostly gone, but I'd fight to ensure she wouldn't get another dime. The day I served her divorce papers, she laughed scornfully. "You think you'll beat me in court? I'm your wife. Half your stuff is mine." I simply said, "You'll see." My lawyer filed the paperwork, citing her unauthorized spending as one of the key points of contention. We asked the court to recognize the inheritance as separate property that she wrongfully appropriated. Her reaction was to lash out. She threatened to smear my reputation, claiming I abused her emotionally. But I had texts and emails showing her manipulations and full knowledge of my objections to the renovation. My lawyer calmly assured me such false accusations wouldn't stand in court. She tried anyway, but the judge quickly dismissed her baseless claims when we presented evidence of her months-long spree of unauthorized spending. Meanwhile, her parents discovered the truth. She'd done this entire project behind my back, not with my enthusiastic blessing. The contractors demanded final payments, and she turned to her parents for the last chunk. Furious, they realized she'd sold them a lie, saying I was fully on board. They felt betrayed, too. Suddenly, they faced potential liens on their home if the contractors weren't paid. The final payments never came, thanks to my legal actions freezing our joint account. The parents raged at her, blaming her for incomplete renovations, expensive bills, and a pending lawsuit from the contractors. Susan found herself cornered, with no further money to fix the mess. By the time we entered divorce mediation, she was desperate. The house renovations were half done, contractors hounding them, and she was locked out of my finances. She demanded spousal support, alimony, anything to salvage her situation. My lawyer hammered home her misconduct, her purposeful misuse of my inheritance, the secret bank transfers, her disregard for my explicit refusals. The judge took a dim view of her entitlement. Instead of awarding her anything significant, the judge recognized the inheritance as separate property and acknowledged she spent it unilaterally on a property that wasn't even ours. This weighed heavily against her in the settlement. In the end, she walked away nearly empty-handed. No spousal support, limited division of our communal assets, which we'd never fully merged anyway, and she remained personally liable for part of the renovation debt. Standing in the courthouse corridor, she glared at me with disbelief. "You ruined my life," she hissed. I felt no pity. "You wasted my father's legacy for your parents' vanity project. This is the consequence of your actions." She turned on her heel and left. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she moved back in with her parents, who themselves were upset by the half-finished remodel and mounting debts. Meanwhile, I sold our marital home, used part of the proceeds to recoup some losses, with the court's permission, and started anew in a smaller condo. It wasn't how I envisioned my life unfolding, but at least I stood my ground, ensuring she didn't profit further from her deceit. As I finalized the last details of the divorce, I looked up to the sky. My father's money was gone, but I hoped he'd understand I fought back. She paid the price for her greed, and I was finally free of her manipulative grasp.